My name is David Carter, and what I'm about to share with you is something that I never thought would happen to me. You see, I've always been a logical man, an engineer, a problem solver, someone who believed in the power of human ingenuity. The world made sense to me in equations and blueprints. But what I experienced, what I saw, has left me questioning everything I thought I knew. It all started on an unassuming Tuesday evening. The hum of my laptop, the dim glow of the screen, and the faint sound of rain tapping against the window created an ambience I often found comforting. I was working late, as usual, poring over schematics for a new project. I was healthy, or at least I thought I was. No warning signs, no dramatic foreshadowing, just a man at his desk, unaware that he was minutes away from crossing into another realm. And then, it happened. A sudden, piercing pain gripped my chest, stealing the breath from my lungs. I remember falling to the floor, the coldness of the hardwood against my cheek, and a desperate attempt to call out for help. But my voice, it wouldn't come. The world around me began to fade, like a camera lens slowly losing focus. First, the rain. Then, the hum of the laptop. Finally, the sound of my own heartbeat. In those final moments, a profound stillness enveloped me. I thought, is this it? Is this how it ends? But it wasn't the end. In fact, it was only the beginning. Because when my heart stopped beating, my soul began a journey that words can barely describe. What I saw, what I experienced, was not just life-changing. It was a warning. A warning about the world we live in, about the path humanity is treading, and about the role modern technology is playing in our spiritual downfall. It's a message I feel compelled to share with you today, not because I want to, but because I must. I don't expect you to believe me right away. Honestly, if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be standing here, sharing a near-death experience, I would have laughed in your face. But trust me when I say this. Once you hear what I have to tell you, you'll understand why this story needs to be told, why it needs to be heard. And so, I invite you to join me on this journey. Together, we'll explore the boundaries between life and death, the physical and the spiritual, and the undeniable truth that lies at the heart of it all. What you're about to hear isn't just my story. It's a wake-up call for all of us. A call to reflect, to question, and to prepare for what's coming. Because what I saw on the other side, it's already happening. Before this life-altering experience, I was, by all accounts, an ordinary man living an ordinary life. My name is David Carter, and I've spent most of my adult years immersed in the world of technology. I was the kind of person who believed in the limitless potential of human invention. I grew up in a small town where my curiosity about how things worked set me apart. By the time I was in high school, I was building computers from scratch and programming rudimentary software. My parents were proud, but they didn't fully understand my passion. David, my father used to say, "You're always trying to play God with those machines." I'd laugh it off, never giving his words much thought. After all, wasn't technology meant to empower us? To make life better? That was my belief, and I pursued it with everything I had. After graduating from college with a degree in engineering, I landed a job at a cutting-edge tech firm. My work revolved around artificial intelligence, creating systems that could think, learn, and even anticipate human needs. I was on the forefront of what many called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. To me, it wasn't just a job, it was a mission. I believed we were on the cusp of creating a world where technology could solve humanity's greatest problems. But behind the accolades and the long hours, something was missing. My marriage had fallen apart years earlier, a casualty of my relentless pursuit of success. My relationship with my daughter, Emily, was strained at best. "You're always working, Dad," she'd say during our brief phone calls. "Do you even care about the real world anymore?" Her words stung, but I'd brush them aside, convincing myself that my work was for the greater good. Faith? God? I didn't give those things much thought. Growing up, my family attended church sporadically, but by the time I was an adult, I saw religion as an outdated concept. Science and reason were my gods, and I was confident they held all the answers. But if I'm honest, there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when doubt crept in. Late at night, when the house was silent, I'd find myself staring out the window, wondering if there was more to life than algorithms and innovation. The world seemed to be moving faster than ever. But at what cost? I'd see news headlines about rising depression rates, political unrest, and environmental collapse, and I couldn't help but feel that something was deeply wrong. Still, I buried those feelings under the weight of my work. You're making a difference, I'd tell myself. You're part of the solution. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was disconnected from my family, from myself, and perhaps even from something greater. That Tuesday evening was no different from countless others. I had spent the day locked in my office, finalizing a proposal for a revolutionary AI system that could integrate seamlessly into everyday life. My team called it the Virtual Shepherd. Its purpose was to guide users, making decisions for them based on their habits, preferences, and behaviors. It was designed to be intuitive, almost omniscient. To me, it was the pinnacle of human achievement. But to some of my colleagues, it was something else entirely. One of them, a devout Christian named Rachel, had pulled me aside during a meeting. "David," she'd said, her voice trembling, "don't you see what we're doing? This isn't just technology, it's replacing God. You need to be careful." I had laughed her off, dismissing her concerns as superstition. But her words lingered in the back of my mind that evening as I sat at my desk. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, and the house felt unusually quiet. I glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. I should have gone to bed, but the excitement of finishing the proposal kept me awake. Then, without warning, everything changed. The first sign was subtle, almost easy to ignore. A dull ache in my chest, like a fleeting reminder of a long-forgotten injury. I assumed it was stress or exhaustion, perhaps the price of yet another late night at my desk. I stretched my arms, hoping to shake it off, and took another sip of cold coffee. But the ache didn't go away. In fact, it grew sharper, more insistent, until it felt like a hand gripping my heart, squeezing with unrelenting force. My breathing quickened, shallow and panicked, as if my lungs had suddenly forgotten how to work. I tried to stand, to call for help, but my legs betrayed me. They gave out beneath me, and I crumpled to the floor. My head struck the edge of the desk on the way down, sending a flash of white-hot pain through my skull. The coffee cup shattered beside me, its dark contents pooling on the floor like spilled ink. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make some noise. Anything to alert the world to my distress. But no sound came. My voice was trapped, as if the connection between my mind and body had been severed. I could feel the life draining from me, like a candle burning out, one flicker at a time. And then, the silence came. It wasn't the silence of an empty room or a quiet night. It was a silence that consumed everything, swallowing the faintest hum of the laptop, the ticking of the clock, even the sound of my own heartbeat. It was as if the world itself had been turned off, leaving me suspended in a void. For a moment I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. The realization was strangely calm, devoid of the panic I'd felt moments earlier. My mind, ever analytical, began cataloging my regrets. Missed family dinners, unspoken apologies, time wasted chasing accolades that now felt meaningless. But as I prepared to surrender to the darkness, something unexpected happened. A faint light appeared in the distance, barely more than a pinprick in the black void. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, drawing me toward it. I felt weightless, as though my body had been left behind. And yet I was moving, being pulled, perhaps, toward the light. The closer I got, the brighter it became, until it filled my entire field of vision. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm, like the first rays of sunlight after a storm. Then I felt it. A presence. It's hard to describe, but it was as if someone was there with me, unseen yet undeniably real. The presence carried a sense of peace, but also an overwhelming weight of authority. I felt exposed, as though every hidden corner of my soul was laid bare. "David," a voice said, deep and resonant, yet gentle enough to calm my racing thoughts. It wasn't a voice I recognized, yet it felt intimately familiar. "It is not your time, but there is something you must see." Before I could respond, or even comprehend what was happening, the light around me shifted. It began to form shapes, scenes, and images, as though I was standing in the middle of a vast, three-dimensional movie. The warmth faded, replaced by a cold, sterile atmosphere. I was no longer in the void, but in a world that felt eerily familiar and yet profoundly unsettling. I found myself standing in a cityscape, though it didn't resemble any city I'd ever visited. Towering skyscrapers made entirely of glass and metal stretched into the sky, their surfaces illuminated by an unearthly glow. The air buzzed with an electric hum, and the streets were filled with people. But they didn't look at one another. They didn't speak. Instead, they moved like automatons, their faces devoid of expression, their eyes fixed on small devices in their hands. The devices emitted a strange, pulsing light, the same color as the glow that filled the city. As I watched, I realized that the light wasn't just coming from the devices. It was coming from them. Thin, glowing lines extended from the screens, wrapping around the people like chains. I could feel their emptiness, their loss of autonomy, as if they had surrendered their very souls to these machines. "What is this place?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I spoke aloud. The voice returned, calm yet tinged with sorrow. "This is a vision of what is to come, a world where humanity has traded its connection to the divine for the false promises of technology." The scene shifted again, and I found myself in a vast, white room filled with rows upon rows of monitors. Each screen displayed a different person's face, their lives broadcast in real time. Above the monitors, a glowing symbol hovered, a mark I didn't recognize but instinctively knew was significant. The voice explained, "This is the system. It controls everything: who eats, who works, who lives." I felt a chill run through me as I noticed something strange about the faces on the screens. They all had the same vacant expression, as though their free will had been stripped away. I tried to look away, but the images were everywhere, surrounding me. "Why are you showing me this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What am I supposed to do?" "You must warn them," the voice said, its tone firm but compassionate. "The time is coming when every soul will be faced with a choice. The path you have walked has led you here, so that you may lead others back to the truth." Before I could ask what the voice meant, the vision began to dissolve, and I felt myself being pulled backward, away from the city, the monitors, and the glowing mark. The light around me faded, and the cold sterility was replaced by the warmth of the void. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself lying on the floor of my office, gasping for air. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a strange heaviness in my soul. I was alive, but I was no longer the same. Lying on the floor of my office, gasping for air, I realized that I had been brought back, but the experience wasn't over. My body may have returned to life, but my soul still carried the weight of what I had seen and heard. And then, as if drawn by an unseen force, I closed my eyes again and found myself standing in a place that words can barely describe. It wasn't the city I had seen moments earlier, nor the void of light where the voice had first spoken to me. This place was alive, vibrant, radiant, and overwhelming in its beauty. Rolling fields of golden grass stretched endlessly under a sky painted with colors I had never seen before. A river, shimmering like liquid crystal, flowed through the landscape, its waters whispering a melody that resonated deep within my soul. The air was thick with peace, And yet I felt a strange urgency, as though I was there for a purpose. David, the voice spoke again, closer now, almost as if standing beside me. This is but a glimpse of what was intended for humanity, a creation untouched by corruption. I turned toward the sound, and there he stood. I knew, without a doubt, that it was him, Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, a perfect balance of authority and compassion. His eyes, like pools of fire and water, seemed to pierce through every barrier I had ever built around my heart. I fell to my knees, unable to speak, overcome by the sheer magnitude of his presence. "You have been given a great responsibility," he said, his voice gentle yet commanding. "What you have seen is a warning, a glimpse of the path humanity has chosen, but it is not too late." As he spoke, the scene around us began to shift. The golden fields faded, replaced by a vast, dark expanse. I saw countless people walking toward a massive, glowing gate. It was a technological marvel, pulsing with energy and light. Above the gate, the same symbol I had seen in the White Room hovered, a mark that seemed to radiate both allure and menace. The people walked willingly, their faces devoid of emotion, their eyes fixed on the gate as if under a spell. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This is the choice," Jesus replied. "The world has been given over to its desires, comfort, convenience, and control. They have built their tower, but its foundation is corruption." As the people entered the gate, I saw what lay beyond. It was a desolate wasteland, filled with the cries of those who had entered before. They were chained, bound not by physical restraints, but by the very devices they had once embraced. The glowing lines I had seen in the city wrapped around their bodies, pulling them deeper into the darkness. "Many will choose this path," Jesus said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "For the gate is wide, and the road is easy that leads to destruction." My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. "But why?" I asked. "Why would they choose this?" "Because they do not see it for what it is," he replied. "The enemy has disguised bondage as freedom, dependency as empowerment. The mark you see represents allegiance, not to me, but to the false promises of the world." I felt a lump in my throat as I realized the enormity of what I was witnessing. This wasn't just a vision of some distant future. It was already happening. The systems, the technologies, the values we had embraced as progress, they were leading us here. Then the scene shifted again, and I found myself in what can only be described as a throne room. The air was thick with glory, and I could barely lift my head to look. A brilliant light emanated from the throne, and surrounding it were countless beings, radiant and majestic, their voices singing praises in a language I didn't understand, but felt deeply in my spirit. One of the beings stepped forward, holding what looked like a scroll. Its surface shimmered, covered in writing that seemed to move and shift. "These are the warnings given to the world," the being said, its voice like the sound of rushing waters. "But many have ignored them." I was shown glimpses of these warnings, prophecies, signs, and messages sent through generations. Yet, time and again, they had been dismissed, mocked, or forgotten. And now, the world was teetering on the edge of a choice that could not be undone. "David," Jesus said, drawing my attention back to him, "you have been given this vision so that you may speak. Time is short, but my mercy endures. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them of the choice before them." "But how?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "Who will believe me? I'm just one man." He placed his hand on my shoulder, and in that moment I felt a surge of strength and peace unlike anything I had ever known. "You are not alone," he said. "My spirit will guide you. Speak the truth and leave the rest to me." The vision began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back into my body. The warmth of his presence lingered, even as the throne room dissolved into darkness. The last thing I heard before waking was his voice. "Be not afraid, for I am with you always." As I returned to consciousness, gasping for air on the floor of my office. I thought the vision had ended, but I was wrong. It was as if a curtain had been pulled back, and for a brief moment, I was still connected to the spiritual realm. Images, flashes of the future, and a profound understanding of what was to come flooded my mind. And then came the most shocking revelation of all, the one that continues to haunt me to this day. I saw the rise of a global system, a structure so pervasive, so insidious, that it touched every corner of human life. It began with small, seemingly harmless innovations: convenience, connectivity, and security. Microchips implanted in hands to unlock doors and make purchases. Digital identities replacing physical documents. At first, people embraced these changes with enthusiasm, marveling at how much easier life had become. But the convenience came at a price. The systems were not merely tools, they were gateways. Through these devices, a greater power exerted control, monitoring every action, every thought, every word. The mark I had seen in the earlier vision was no longer just a symbol. It was now a mandate. Without it, people were cut off from society, unable to buy, sell, or even travel. But accepting it meant more than just compliance. It meant allegiance. I watched as people lined up to receive this mark, deceived by promises of safety and prosperity. They believed they were stepping into a brighter future, but what they didn't realize was that they were surrendering their very souls. The glowing lines I had seen wrapping around them weren't just metaphors, they were bonds, tethering them to a system designed to strip away their humanity. And then I saw him, a figure cloaked in shadow, standing at the helm of this global system. His presence was magnetic, his words intoxicating. He spoke of unity, of peace, of solving the world's greatest problems. The crowd cheered, their faces filled with admiration. But as I looked closer, I saw the truth. Behind the charm and charisma was a darkness so profound it made my soul shudder. "This is the deceiver," the voice whispered, its tone filled with sorrow. "He will come in the guise of a savior, but his power is not his own. Many will follow him, not knowing the cost." The figure raised his hand, and the symbol, the mark, glowed brightly above him. "With this," he declared, "we shall transcend our limitations. We shall become as gods." The crowd erupted in cheers, their faces lit with blind devotion. But behind the cheering, I heard something else. A faint, anguished cry. It was the cry of those who had taken the mark, realizing too late what they had lost. I tried to speak, to warn them, but no words came. All I could do was watch as the world surrendered itself to this false savior. The scene shifted again, and I saw the consequences of their choice. The earth, once vibrant and alive, became a barren wasteland. The sky darkened, the rivers dried up, and the people, those who had embraced the mark, wandered aimlessly, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. And then I saw another group, a remnant. They were fewer in number, but their faces shone with a light that stood in stark contrast to the darkness around them. They bore no mark, and though their lives were harder, their spirits were free. They had chosen faith over fear, truth over deception. I felt a deep sense of hope as I watched them, but also an overwhelming burden. "David," the voice said again, "you must tell them. The world is at a crossroads. Many will choose the wide path, but some will hear and choose the narrow gate. Speak, and let those who have ears to hear. Listen." The vision began to fade, but one final image burned itself into my mind. It was the figure in shadow, standing triumphant for what seemed like a fleeting moment. And then, a brilliant light pierced through the darkness, shattering his throne and casting him down. The voice spoke one last time. "My victory is assured, but the battle for souls rages on. Be faithful, for I am coming soon." When I finally woke, I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. The weight of what I had seen was unbearable, and yet I knew I had been entrusted with it for a reason. I didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a vision for me. It was a warning for all of us. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the presence of the divine or witnessing the stark visions of the future. I was back in my office, lying on the cold, coffee-stained floor. My body ached, my chest was tight, and my head throbbed where it had struck the desk. But none of that mattered. What truly struck me was the profound sense of urgency and responsibility that now filled my soul. I sat up slowly, the events of the past minutes, or was it hours, playing over and over in my mind. The voice, the visions, the warnings, they felt more real than the physical world around me. I looked at my surroundings, the familiar trappings of my old life, the glowing laptop, the schematics for the virtual shepherd project, the awards and certificates on the wall. All of it suddenly felt hollow, meaningless. As I sat there, I realized that I'd been given something I couldn't ignore, a second chance, a divine calling. But along with that realization came fear. Who would believe me? How could I explain what I had seen without sounding insane? The logical, pragmatic part of me, the part that had spent years trusting only in science and reason, wanted to dismiss the experience as a hallucination, a product of stress or a lack of oxygen to the brain. But I couldn't. The images, the voice, the overwhelming presence of Jesus, they weren't fading like a dream or a memory. They were seared into my spirit, as clear and vivid as if I were still there. And then I remembered his words. You must tell them. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen, unsure of where to begin. My hands trembled as I typed out everything I could remember, every detail of the vision. The weight of the responsibility pressed heavily on me. I wasn't a theologian or a preacher. I was an engineer, a man who had spent his life believing in the power of machines. How could I, of all people, be chosen to deliver such a message? In the days that followed, I found myself struggling to reconcile my old life with the transformation that had begun within me. The things that once consumed my thoughts, the latest advancements in technology, the push for innovation, the pursuit of recognition, now felt like distractions, blinders keeping me from seeing the bigger picture. Sharing my experience wasn't easy. When I first told my colleagues at work, their reactions ranged from polite skepticism to outright dismissal. Some of them laughed, assuming it was a bizarre joke. Others avoided me entirely, uncomfortable with the sudden shift in my demeanor. Rachel, the devout Christian who had warned me about the virtual shepherd project, was the only one who listened without judgment. Tears filled her eyes as I recounted my vision, and she whispered, God has a plan for you, David. But it wasn't just work. My relationship with my daughter Emily became a central focus of my transformation. I reached out to her, apologizing for the years of neglect and explaining the experience that had changed my life. At first, she was skeptical, even hurt. Do you really expect me to believe this? She asked, her voice tinged with anger. But as I persisted, sharing not just the vision, but the lessons I had learned about faith, love, and the dangers of misplaced priorities, her walls began to come down. It wasn't an instant reconciliation, but it was a start. The hardest part, however, was facing myself. For years, I had built my identity around control, controlling outcomes, controlling my environment, controlling my life. But the vision had shown me how little control I truly had and how dangerous it was to place my trust in anything other than God. It was humbling, even painful, to confront my own arrogance and misplaced faith in human achievement. But it was also liberating. I began to pray, something I hadn't done since childhood. At first, it felt awkward, almost foreign. But as I continued, I felt a sense of peace and connection that I had never known before. I started reading the Bible, seeking answers to the questions that now consumed me. Verses like Matthew 7:13-14. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. took on new meaning in light of what I had seen. I knew my life could never go back to what it had been before. The vision had left me with a responsibility, a calling to warn others about the dangers of the path we were on and to point them toward the truth. It wasn't an easy road, but it was the only one I could take. As I sit here today, sharing this with you, I'm not the same man I was before that night. I've let go of the things I once held so tightly. My pride, my reliance on technology, my obsession with control. Instead, I've embraced a new path, one guided by faith, truth, and a deep desire to help others see the dangers that lie ahead. The vision I experienced wasn't just a warning for me. It's a warning for all of us. We live in a world that promises ease and convenience, where technology claims to solve every problem. But we must ask ourselves, at what cost? What are we sacrificing in exchange for comfort? Are we unknowingly giving up our freedom, our humanity, and even our souls? The Bible tells us in Revelation 13:16-17, "It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name." I don't claim to understand everything about the future or how these prophecies will unfold, but I know this: the choices we make today are shaping the road ahead. I don't share this to scare you, but to wake you up. The narrow path, the one that leads to life, isn't easy. It requires sacrifice, faith, and a willingness to stand against the tide of the world. But it's the only path worth taking. So I leave you with this question: what will you choose? Will you follow the crowd, embracing the promises of a world that seems to offer everything but delivers nothing? Or will you seek the truth, even when it's difficult, even when it sets you apart? The time to decide is now. None of us know how much time we have left, and the choices we make today will echo into eternity. If you've heard something in my story that resonates with you, don't ignore it. Reflect on it. Pray about it. Seek answers, and don't be afraid to walk the narrow path. As for me, I've made my choice. My life is no longer my own. It belongs to the one who saved me, who gave me this second chance, and who has called me to speak. And now, I pass this message on to you, praying that you'll take it to heart. May God guide you, protect you, and lead you to the truth. Remember, He is with you always, even to the end of the age.